At 4:47 on the morning of May 11, 1945, Private John McKinney lay in his tent near Dingalan Bay, Luzon, unaware that approximately 100 Japanese soldiers were creeping through the jungle toward his position. 24 years old, 2 years in the Army, a sharecropper son from Georgia with a third-grade education. By May 1945, the Philippine campaign had already cost the United States over 60,000 casualties. Japanese forces on Luzon refused to surrender. They launched night attacks, dawn raids, suicide charges against American perimeters. Company A of the 123rd Infantry Regiment, 33rd Infantry Division, had established an outpost near Dingalan Bay in Tayabas Province. The position guarded a crucial supply route. 3 Americans manned a light machine gun on the perimeter. McKinney had just finished a long shift at that gun. He walked a few paces to his tent, laid down with his M1 rifle beside him. The jungle was quiet. The Japanese knew this outpost existed. They had been watching it for days, counting the Americans, timing the guard rotations, planning their assault. The attack force moved through the darkness. Over 100 soldiers from remnants of Japanese units still fighting on Luzon. They carried rifles, grenades, knee mortars, and swords. Their objective was simple: overrun the American position, kill everyone, capture the supplies. The vanguard slipped past the outer guard post undetected. Sergeant Fukutaro Mori led the advance element. His orders were to eliminate the first Americans silently. No gunfire, swords and bayonets only. By the time the main force attacked, the perimeter would already be compromised. Mori reached McKinney's tent. He could hear the American breathing inside. One quick strike would end this man's life before he could raise an alarm. McKinney had grown up hunting in the Georgia woods. His father was a sharecropper in Screven County. The family had nothing. John learned to shoot before he learned to read. By the time he was 12, he could hit a squirrel at 50 yards with a .22 rifle. He trapped rabbits, shot deer. Fishing and hunting put food on the family table when the crops failed. He enlisted at Fort McPherson in November 1942. The Army discovered he could barely read or write. They also discovered he was one of the best marksmen they had ever seen. His qualification: scores were exceptional. Drill sergeants noticed he moved through the woods differently than other soldiers. Quieter, more aware. He had spent his entire life in environments where a single mistake meant going hungry. The 33rd Infantry Division shipped to the Pacific in 1943. McKinney fought through New Guinea, survived the jungle, survived the Japanese, survived malaria and dysentery, and everything else the Pacific Theater threw at American soldiers. By May 1945, he was a veteran, quiet, kept to himself, did his duty, never complained. His fellow soldiers knew 2 things about John McKinney. He was the best shot in the company, and he slept with his rifle. That rifle was about to save his life. If you want to see how McKinney survived what happened next, please hit that like button. It helps us share these forgotten stories with more people. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Back to McKinney. Sergeant Mori threw open the tent. Flap at 4:51. The sword came down in a diagonal slash aimed at McKinney's neck. In the darkness, Mori misjudged the distance. The blade caught McKinney on the side of the head instead. It severed part of his right ear. Blood sprayed across the tent canvas. McKinney's eyes opened to searing pain and the silhouette of a man standing over him with a raised sword. He had less than 1 second to react. Mori was already bringing the blade down for a second strike. This one would not miss. McKinney's hand found his rifle in the darkness. He did not aim. He did not think. 24 years of survival instinct took over. He swung the M1 like a club. The rifle butt caught Mori under the chin with enough force to shatter bone. The Japanese sergeant staggered. McKinney swung again. The second blow crushed Mori's skull. Outside the tent, McKinney could hear them. Footsteps. Dozens of footsteps moving fast through the camp. The main assault had begun. He was bleeding badly from his ear. His head was ringing from the sword strike. And somewhere in the darkness, nearly 100 Japanese soldiers were coming to kill everyone he knew. McKinney grabbed his rifle and stepped out of the tent. What he saw made his blood run cold. The machine gun position was 30 yards from his tent. 3 Americans had been manning it when he went to rest. Now he could see muzzle flashes in the darkness, screaming, the distinctive crack of Arisaka rifles mixing with the heavier reports of M1 Garands. Japanese soldiers were pouring through the perimeter from the northeast. They moved in waves. The first wave had already reached the machine gun emplacement. McKinney could see figures struggling in the darkness around the gun pit. His mind processed the tactical situation in seconds. The machine gun was the key to the entire position. It covered the main approach to the American camp. If the Japanese captured it and turned it around, they could rake the entire perimeter with fire. Every American in Company A would die. McKinney ran toward the gun. The two soldiers who had replaced him at the machine gun were fighting for their lives. Private James Hendricks had taken a bayonet wound to the shoulder in the first seconds of the attack. The third man, seeing Hendricks go down, made a decision. He grabbed his wounded comrade and dragged him toward the rear of the perimeter. It was the right call. Hendricks would have bled out if left behind. But it meant the machine gun was now undefended. 10 Japanese infantrymen reached the emplacement before McKinney could get there. They swarmed over the sandbag wall. One of them immediately began trying to turn the gun around. The others provided security, rifles pointed outward, watching for any American counterattack. McKinney did not slow down. He did not take cover. He did not wait for backup. He sprinted directly at 10 enemy soldiers who had just captured the most important weapon in the entire outpost. The Japanese saw him coming. A single American bleeding from a head wound, charging straight at them in the pre-dawn darkness. 2 of them raised their rifles. McKinney was faster. He shot the first man at 15 yards. The M1's report echoed across the camp. He shot the second man at 10 yards. By the time he reached the sandbag wall, he had fired 4 rounds. 4 Japanese soldiers were down. Ifai leaped into the emplacement. The space inside was roughly 8 ft by 6 ft. 6 enemy soldiers were still alive in that confined area. Some were trying to swing their rifles around. Others reached for bayonets. One was still fumbling with the machine gun's traversing mechanism. McKinney landed among them and kept firing, point-blank range. The M1 Garand held 8 rounds in its internal magazine. He had already fired 4. He put the next 3 rounds into 3 more Japanese soldiers at distances measured in inches rather than yards. 1 round left. The 8th man was directly in front of him, bayonet raised for a thrust at McKinney's chest. McKinney fired his last round. The soldier dropped. The M1 Garand's bolt locked back on an empty magazine with its distinctive metallic ping. 3 Japanese soldiers were still alive in the gun pit. They had heard that sound. They knew what it meant. McKinney reversed his grip on the rifle before the empty clip had finished. Ejecting, he swung the weapon like an axe. The walnut stock connected with the first soldier's temple. The man collapsed. McKinney swung again. The second soldier tried to block with his forearm. The rifle butt shattered bone and continued into his skull. The third soldier lunged with a bayonet. McKinney sidestepped and brought the rifle down on the back of the man's neck. The vertebrae cracked audibly. 10 Japanese soldiers had captured the machine gun. 30 seconds later, all 10 were dead. McKinney grabbed for the machine gun. His hands found the receiver. Something was wrong. During the struggle, the weapon had been damaged. The bolt was jammed. The feed tray was bent. He cycled the charging handle twice. Nothing. The gun would not fire. The most important weapon in the perimeter was now useless. McKinney looked up from the broken machine gun. Dawn was starting to lighten the eastern horizon, and in that gray light, he could see them. More Japanese soldiers. Many more. They were regrouping at the edge of the jungle, preparing for the next wave. He had an M1 rifle with an empty magazine. He had just killed 10 men in hand-to-hand combat. His ear was still bleeding, and the main assault had not even started yet. McKinney reached down and pulled a bandolier of ammunition from one of the dead Japanese soldiers. American .30 caliber rounds. The man had probably taken them from a previous engagement. McKinney loaded a fresh clip into his rifle. Somewhere in the darkness, a Japanese officer was shouting orders. McKinney could not understand the words, but he understood the tone. They were coming again. He settled into the gun pit among the bodies of the men he had just killed, rested his rifle on the sandbag wall, and waited. The second wave emerged from the jungle 60 yards away. McKinney counted at least 20 soldiers in the first line, more behind them. They came at a run, rifles with fixed bayonets extended, screaming as they charged. McKinney put his front sight on the lead soldier and squeezed the trigger. The M1 Garand was designed for rapid semi-automatic fire. A trained soldier could put 8 aimed rounds downrange in under 10 seconds. McKinney was not a trained soldier. He was a hunter from Georgia who had been shooting since childhood. He was faster. The first Japanese soldier dropped at 60 yards. McKinney shifted his aim. The second man fell. Then the third. The M1 kicked against his shoulder with each shot. Brass casings ejected to his right. He did not think about what he was doing. His body remembered thousands of hours in the Georgia woods. Lead the target. Squeeze the trigger. Acquire the next target. Repeat. The clip ejected with a ping. McKinney slammed in a fresh one from the bandolier. The charging wave had covered 20 yards during his reload. 40 yards now. He started firing again. The Japanese soldiers in the second wave had expected to find a captured machine gun position. They had expected their comrades to be turning that gun on the sleeping Americans. Instead, they found one man with a rifle cutting them down with mechanical precision. 8 rounds. Reload. 8 rounds. Reload. Some of the attackers made it to within 15 yards of the gun pit before McKinney dropped them. Others tried to veer left or right, seeking cover. He tracked them and fired. A soldier who moved was easier to hit than a soldier who stood still. McKinney had learned that hunting deer. The second wave broke. The survivors scattered back toward the jungle. McKinney counted the bodies in front of his position. 11 more, 21 total since the attack began. He did not have time to feel relief. Japanese officers were already reorganizing. He could hear them shouting beyond the tree line. And now he heard something else. A hollow thump from somewhere in the jungle. Then another. Knee mortars. The first round exploded 10 yards to his left. Dirt and shrapnel sprayed across the gun pit. McKinney flattened himself against the sandbags. The second round hit closer. The third landed directly on the parapet, showering him with debris. The Japanese had learned from the first 2 waves. They were not going to charge blindly into his rifle fire again. They would soften the position with mortars first, kill him, or force him to keep his head down, then send in the infantry. McKinney understood the tactical problem immediately. If he stayed in the gun pit, the mortars would eventually find him. The Japanese gunners were adjusting their aim with each shot, getting closer. But if he moved, he would lose the only fortified position in this section of the perimeter. A grenade landed 3 ft away from him. McKinney grabbed it and threw it back over the sandbags. It exploded in midair. The blast wave knocked him sideways. His ears were ringing now. Blood from his severed ear had soaked. Through the makeshift bandage, he had pressed against the wound. Another mortar round hit the sandbags directly. The wall partially collapsed. McKinney was now half exposed to the jungle. He made his decision. Staying meant death. He grabbed 2 bandoliers of ammunition from the dead soldiers around him, slung them over his shoulder, and ran. The Japanese saw him moving. Rifle fire cracked from the tree line. Bullets snapped past his head. McKinney sprinted 15 yards to a shallow depression in the ground. Not a proper foxhole, just a slight dip in the terrain. He threw himself into it and rolled onto his back. Rounds kicked up dirt inches from his face. He crawled to the edge of the depression, found a firing position. The Japanese infantry was moving again. They thought he was running. They thought he was retreating. 2 squads emerged from the jungle at a fast walk, rifles ready, moving toward the abandoned gun pit. McKinney let them get to 30 yards. Then he opened fire. The attackers had bunched together while crossing the open ground. A mistake. McKinney's first shot dropped the point man. His second hit the soldier directly behind. The group scattered, but there was no cover between the jungle and McKinney's new position. He picked them off as they ran. 8 rounds. Reload. The survivors reached the gun pit and found only bodies. Their comrades from the first wave. They had expected to find the American there. They found him shooting at them from a completely different angle. 3 more fell before they could locate his muzzle flash. McKinney changed position again. He moved 10 yards to his right while the Japanese tried to reorganize, found another depression, started firing from the new location. He was doing what he had done in the Georgia woods. Never stay in one place. Never let your target predict where the next shot will come from. A deer that hears 1 gunshot will freeze. A deer that hears 2 from different locations will run in circles. The Japanese were running in circles. Dawn light was spreading across the sky. McKinney had been fighting for 18 minutes. His ammunition was running low. His ear was still bleeding, and he could see movement in the jungle that suggested the enemy was massing for another major push. He needed more ammunition, and he knew exactly where to find it. The dead Japanese soldiers around the gun pit carried ammunition, not just the .30 caliber rounds he had already scavenged. Some of them had Arisaka rifles with full pouches. Others had grenades clipped to their belts. McKinney needed to get back there. He waited for a lull in the mortar fire, counted to 3, then sprinted across the open ground toward the gun pit. Rifle fire erupted from the tree line. McKinney ran in a zigzag pattern. A bullet tugged at his sleeve. Another cracked past his ear. He dove the last 5 FT and landed among the bodies he had created 20 minutes earlier. The smell hit him immediately. Blood and cordite and something else. The copper tang of death. McKinney ignored it. He had butchered hogs on the farm, had gutted deer in the Georgia heat. The smell of death was familiar. He moved quickly through the bodies, grabbed every bandolier he could find, every loose clip. He found 4 American ammunition pouches on men who had probably taken them as trophies. 64 more rounds. He stuffed the clips into his pockets and belt. A Japanese soldier appeared over the sandbag wall. He must have crawled forward while McKinney was gathering ammunition. The man's rifle was already coming up. McKinney shot him through the chest at 2 feet. He grabbed the dead man's grenades, 3 of them. Japanese Type 97 fragmentation grenades.